Shalom and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. Even if the negotiations between the American and Iranian delegations under passive Omani auspices succeed, it is simply realistic to assume that Iran will not totally give up its aspirations to acquire nuclear weapons. Whatever agreement may emerge, with whatever inspection and verification arrangement, the Iranians are sure to work around it and try to perfect their weaponization capability to bolster their missile arsenal. Then, at the time and circumstances of their choosing, they will eventually break out, get their hands on enough highly enriched fissile material, and finally achieve their aspirations of becoming a nuclear power. The question is, can this scenario be prevented? Joining us to dissect this matter include retired Brigadier General Mark Kimmitt, who formerly served as a U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Political and Military Affairs. It's good to see you, General.
Thanks for having me, Jonathan.
Absolutely. Also joining us from New York City is Dr. Olli Heinonen, who formerly served as a Deputy Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, or IAEA, and is currently a Distinguished Fellow at the Stimson Center in Washington, D.C. It's great to see you, Olli.
Honor to join. Thank you.
Absolutely. And with us here at the studio is our TV7 editor-at-large, Mr. Amir Oren. Amir, set the stage for us.
So we are almost 4 rounds into the negotiations with both principals, if Steve Witkoff is considered a principal, and Arakchi. Obviously, they are only standing in for their leaders, and technical teams sitting in. But it seems as if the real question is whether what we are talking about is the content or the packaging. Because if President Trump is determined to get a deal no matter what, for his strategic but also political and personal reasons, then whatever deal he will get, even if it is almost identical to the JCPOA, which he, of course, came out against and then aborted because it was achieved by President Obama. Nevertheless, he will find some way of presenting it as different, much improved. For instance, it may include non-nuclear clauses having to do with the proxies or the missile arsenal, which up to now Iran has insisted is out of bounds. Or let's give you another notion. What if in the preamble, which does not commit the parties the same way as the agreement itself, Iran says that it does not want to destroy any nation, even without mentioning Israel by name? President Trump could show it as the new Iran wanting to invest in the United States, to buy American planes and other equipment, and now no longer wishing to destroy Israel. So again, it might be the wrapping rather than the present itself.
Well, the public, in whatever place where this address would be held, would ultimately respond by calling death to America and death to Israel, so I doubt that will be very successful. But nonetheless, let's turn to our experts today. And Dr. Heinonen, just yesterday we heard the Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman, Baghei, coming out and saying that, saying also in English, if I may add, that while he doesn't intend to negotiate in public, enrichment is off the table. Something that naturally the Americans have stated time and again must be on the table, because without that, the capacity to prevent Iran from achieving nuclear aspirations are pretty much not feasible. Is that correct?
It is correct. And what it really means is that the only thing which Iran wants to negotiate is keeping of the enrichment. That's the only thing they are at this point of time in public ready to admit. And that is a major challenge because the nuclear program is much wider. It has these weaponization activities, discrepancies with declarations to the IAEA. IAEA access to nuclear sites has been blocked for now more than 2 years. So there are a lot of issues which need to be solved between IAEA and Iran and the other parties. And at the same time, time is running. This back clause is expiring in a few months' time. So Iran probably feels very comfortable of putting this hard line and then try to get the Trump administration to agree. And then one more nuance, which doesn't get so much attention. Actually, Iran is negotiating with very many parties at the same time, or consulting. Russians, Chinese, Europeans, together and individually. And I just found from one of my counterparts that even the old negotiating team ambassadors are, warming up the relations with previous negotiators.
Very interesting indeed. Well, we heard last Saturday the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi coming and reinforcing basically what Mr. Oren just stated, that they're unwilling to negotiate anything but their nuclear program. General Kimmitt, one of those matters that they're unwilling to negotiate is their ballistic missile and space program, which naturally is inching towards the capacity to produce intercontinental ballistic missiles that would, in effect, threaten the American homeland and all of Western Europe included. Is that something the Trump administration, or let alone in the current capacity, is willing to not negotiate on?
Well, first of all, every negotiating stance has been the same between the first Trump administration, even when Biden made the initial outreaches, the next second Trump administration, which is you have 3 issues on the table. Number 1, the nuclear program. Number 2, the missile program. Number 3, the proxy program. And the Iranians have always been very clear that a precondition for the negotiations to start is that we have, quote, separate negotiations on the issues of proxies and the issues of missiles, which effectively says if you want to go on to discuss the nuclear program, you got to take these other 2 items off the table. And oddly enough, in all cases, even going back to the Biden administration, that is accepted and the negotiations move on.
Very interesting indeed. Well, Mr. Oren, when we're talking about the Iranian leverage in those talks, what is that exactly?
One has to look at the interests and the motivations of the parties, rather than at the technical details being worked out. Because if there is political will in Tehran and in Washington, the negotiators will be given their marching orders. And if the Khamenei regime wants to get assurances that there will not be any move for regime change, because this is their main worry. The nuclear project that they have is intended to protect the regime. They know that they cannot use it against Israel or any other country. They want to deter others from working against the regime.
But my question specifically is about leverage, since the Iranians, their proxies, are being pounded wherever we look. They have been incapacitated in most of the countries where they had their robust influence. The only aspect that comes to mind is avoiding America used the long stick alongside Israel and other Western powers. And therefore, my question again is, what leverage do they have to tell the Americans, well, you know what, we're not going to negotiate now?
The agreement itself. Their leverage is telling President Trump, listen, if you want to get an achievement in the Middle East, you're going to Saudi Arabia, to Qatar, to the Emirates, you want to come out with some breakthrough in the relations between those Gulf countries and Israel, those Gulf countries and Iran. You want to be a peacemaker and a deal maker. You want to sell Iran a lot of American goods, then if you want the agreement, you have to compromise on the content. What we can give you is the agreement itself.
Dr. Heinonen, how can such an agreement actually ensure that Iran does not gain nuclear weapon capabilities in 3 years from today?
Well, there is no absolute assurance for sure, but it depends pretty much how one investigates the past program and how forthcoming Iran is in proving that it has dismantled all those activities which it had one point of time, and to get the real status of them, because I don't think that it's crystal clear which kind of capabilities they have today, how far did they go with the weaponization, and are they, some components, ready to be deployed, as Mr. Salehi or someone else has said. So crux of the matter for that is that then you have a baseline. And based on this baseline, then you have to have a very intrusive, unpredictable inspection and monitoring regime to make sure that you observe early enough that if they are renegating, that you find it out. And this means also that the IAEA inspection activities, if the uranium enrichment particularly stays there, needs to be radically revised and updated to serve for that purpose.
But you spoke earlier about an existing gap that emerged in light of the Iran regime basically abandoning the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action in response to the American decision to do so itself. And then it basically started to expel IAEA inspectors. The continuity of knowledge, as the agency keeps referring to, has been disrupted to the level where reconstructing all of that information will be very hard, not impossible, but very hard. And then again, it goes back to the 2008 political arrangement that brought about the Joint Plan of Action, where a political decision that was at the time, if correct me if I'm wrong, reached with China, was the foundation on what Iran, basically the information Iran provided the agency to start as a beginning point or starting point for scrutiny. Therefore, my question is, any arrangement, will it be based on the West requiring to trust Iranian information?
Trust but verify. That's the name of the approach. And what the JCPOA really didn't include was the full verification of the past nuclear weapons-related activities of Iran. Those were omitted, perhaps because of political reasons. People perhaps thought that Iran will change with time its behavior and these things don't proceed. But at this point of time, we don't have assurances. Where do they stand today?
General Kimmitt, if we really look into the current complexity, what is the American calculus in the broad picture, other than avoiding the necessity to confront Iran and eradicating the nuclear infrastructure to the point where it's not necessarily to no return, but it delays it a couple of extra years and effectively also destabilizes the regime to a point where it might not necessarily survive?
Well, first of all, I think that we've got to recognize that we've been predicting the downfall of the Iranian regime since 1979, the day after the revolution happened. It's a durable regime. The program inside of Iran is very popular. So I don't think that we can suggest that anything that is happening here at this point with these negotiations is going to change that calculus. The strategic issue, of course, is, yes, it is dangerous if Iran gets a nuclear weapon, full stop. The real strategic issue is that will inspire and create a nuclear arms race inside the Middle East. It's unlikely that the Saudis would accept it. that the Emiratis would accept it without going to their friends and relatives in places such as Pakistan to develop their own program. So now, not only do we have an additional nuclear-armed country like Iran, but all the NPT protocols around the world are just going to be thrown out of off the table. And if UAE and Saudi Arabia and Iran has a nuclear weapon, who else is going to want a nuclear weapon? That's the nightmare scenario. Not so much that the Iranians might use it, but that the Iranians will create a arms race around the world, and the probability of a particular nation using it may be low, but when you have 25 nations with nukes, all with a low probability, I would suspect that one of those is going to make the world much dangerous by its use.
Indeed. Well, Mr. Oren, Dr. Heinonen spoke about the IAEA. The fact of the matter is that under UN Security Council Resolution 2231, there is still the JCPOA's additional protocol and the snapback mechanism in the event that the E3, in this current instance, to include France, Britain, and Germany, think that it is time to reenact or reinvigorate this mechanism. It would trigger a lot of sanctions, political sanctions against the Islamic Republic, something that Tehran seems to be very wary of. The expiration to this mechanism is on October the 18th. What can you tell us about that?
Well, of course, if the negotiations are still going on at the time, and President Trump seemed to say that they will be over much earlier, successfully, then the Iranians will break off the negotiations. They will say, we have been punished. Yes, it's in the books. It was not illegal, and you have the power to do it. But that shows ill will, and we are not going to do it. But there is also Trump's dilemma. If Trump wants to get a deal, he must have a credible military deterrent against the Iranians. But this is the same president who wants to retreat from the world, does not want to start a war which could end as a forever war. What's the solution to this problem? Israel. What he's saying, in effect, especially after his meeting with Netanyahu, is I'm not going to start a war against Iran, but the Israelis might. I'm not saying I'm going to unleash them, but they're sovereign and independent. They could do it. So he's trying, as a negotiator, to say to the Iranians and to the American public, I'm not going to start anything, but listen, the Israelis could very well do it.
Well, he changed that tone at some point.
Yes.
And he stated that we would lead the engagement ourselves.
Yes.
So that changed the tone completely, entirely from the previous statements.
By that he meant that the U.S. will not lead from behind, will not be drawn into an adventure which it has not decided on. But nevertheless, the Iranians are on notice that Israel could do it, and Trump will not stop Netanyahu from doing it.
Indeed. Well, going back to the snapback mechanism, what needs to be done, Dr. Heinonen, in order to enact this mechanism, and to what degree is it actually effective, considering that President Trump's maximum pressure campaign is already gradually moving towards a very stringent attack on Iran's energy sector, but also in broader terms to additional sectors?
At one point of time, I think it's important to talk in that way that is it really in Iran's interest to continue this current route, building more and more enrichment and other activities, and at the same time not to clear the past history? I was in South Africa a month ago, and we had a meeting with the former weapons people of South Africa, and we went through the dismantlement of the program, actually from the cradle to grave, and we looked which were the experiences. And then when I look, what did we do in 1993, 1994, 95, and then after for the monitoring in South Africa, JCPOA didn't provide such kind of tools to the IAEA, particularly when it went to the history of the weaponization. We went much further. We followed the equipment also almost 20 years after the dismantlement of the program and the locations from occasional visits. And JCPOA didn't have such provisions. There is one article, or section 7, I think it is, where something was said, but there was no clear responsibility to anyone assigned on that. And I think that this is where the solution is. If Iran wants to come and integrate itself with the international community and the region, that needs to be done. But decision has to come from Iran, but the offer has to be lucrative so that they pick it.
Thank you, Dr. Heinonen. General Kimmitt, we don't have very much time left, and you highlighted on a couple of occasions that the maximum pressure campaign is not yet in full force, meaning there are still different actions that can be undertaken to really pressure Iran to a point where it would have to consider its own regime survival or to pursue its nuclear weapon capabilities that, in effect, it believes to be a tool in order to allow the regime to survive. What can you tell us about that, and to what degree is that one of those options that the Trump administration is considering?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to note that up to this point in the conversation, we've had the Obama argument, which is we either sign a treaty or we go to war. But I think President Trump has said there is a middle ground, which is exactly as you say, to screw down on the maximum pressure campaign, which has been anything but maximum at this point. We have not embargoed the oil. We have not penalized or pursued those that are violating the sanctions that the Americans have imposed, such as India and China that need that oil so much. And you did properly note at the beginning that President Trump has said, I'm not a president that wants to start a war. I'm one that's going to end a war. So even though we're at the first round of a 150 round boxing match with the Iranians, I still believe that we still have a middle ground from going to a diplomatic solution to an economic solution before we go to a military solution.
Well, one of the questions that I would have, and that is to Dr. Heinonen, is there the possibility to enact a full-fledged maximum pressure campaign with the short timeline for breakout that the Iranians are currently in?
I think it's hard to believe that, because Iran has to survive 6 more months if you snap back. And what I see, they are buying time. They are clearly buying time and try to transfer the pressure to the US side and the other parties. That's why they have these negotiations and start slowly once a week, small 2, 3, 4 hour meeting, and then next one week from now. Time is running, and it's not necessarily in the advantage of the Iran's adversaries.
Mr. Oren, something that became apparent to me following the meeting between Abbas Araghchi, the Iranian foreign minister, and Russian President Vladimir Putin, during the course of which the Iranian top diplomat relayed messages from Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of the Islamic Republic. It seems like, first of all, they're fully coordinated, and Dr. Heinonen also mentioned the deep involvement of both the Russians and the Chinese in this matter, including additional countries. But it seems that one of the things that somehow frustrates President Donald Trump, based on his public appearances, is that Russia is not playing ball. And that has triggered, in his public statements, him to say that, oh, yes, this is not working out. I'm very dismayed. But look, we have here the Iranian file that is being successful. Is this something that the Iranians are taking note of? And manipulating, so to speak, into their advantage in close coordination with the Russians, who, let's face it, have an interest in the Americans failing and gaining yet another bad agreement.
I may surprise you. I think that what the Iranians are striving for is what they perceive as the Israeli model. Now, Israel has the image. I'm, of course, not privy to anything. I don't know whether this image is grounded in truth. But the appearance, the image, is that Israel has had for many years a nuclear program. The world has grown accustomed to it, and nobody is doing anything about it. Of course, we have the preparatory meeting because next year we have the review for the NPT. However, the world usually believes that Israel would never use whatever it has unless it has its back to the wall. In the Iranian terms, the back to the wall is for the regime. And therefore, the Iranians would like to have the world led by the Americans agree that they keep whatever they have, not talk about it anymore, not use it to flaunt it against anyone, just keep it in case they need it. They may have something going there.
Well, they have one issue, or a couple issues. One is Israel. 2 is Israel. 3 is Israel. And 4 is America, both of whom have been quite open about the fact that they would never accept such a formula. So we'll have to wait and see whether or not this ends up in this context. But nonetheless, we don't have time left. So I'd like to thank both Dr. Heinonen and General Kimmitt for all of your valuable insights. I'd like to thank Mr. Oren as well. I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition from here in Jerusalem. Shalom. Israel has launched operations
on Vladimir Putin.
Helping Iran develop. We have logic, we have rationale, we understand how the system operates. TV7 Israel invites you to watch and hear some of the most knowledgeable experts, most of whom partook in creating policies shaping this region today. Join us for Jerusalem Studio.